the wine industry is suffering. With the rain bombs, with our fires, with our heavy droughts, that Napa Valley cab that you've become accustomed to, it's going to change. What is next for California winemaking? This is Feast or Famine, Episode 4, Wine.
There's a lot of great quotes about farming. You know, Mother Nature always bats last, and the difference between a great farmer and a horrible farmer is 2 weeks. Little calls can make all the difference. You're just kind of dodging bullets.
This is Jake Bilbrough, a fourth-generation Sonoma County winemaker and grape grower.
Historically, those bullets of Mother Nature that she'd throw at you, whether it would be rain or heat or, you know, whatever it may be, it wasn't like they were bullets that were flying at you, you know, with deadly intensity coming straight at you. It was more like, okay, we got some challenges and let's see what we can do here. That's changed. It's huge rain cycles, but coming in completely unprecedented times. Heat spikes come out of nowhere, and it's not, you know, 95 degrees, it's 108 degrees. If you all of a sudden in mid-August get, you know, 3-4 days of 105, 108, 110 degree heat, it's not even that you're getting unwanted premature sugar accumulation. The grapes, they're basically just raisinning, but they're also getting burned. And so the skins burn, then they don't ripen the rest of the way. You're getting all of these other issues. And these vineyards, in our case, that have upwards of century-old biological clocks, they don't know how to react to this.
How can you, as a winemaker, forecast for that?
You can't prepare for that.
We really embrace the idea of working with the vintage, working with the fruit that we're given from that year, and make the best wine that we can. You know,
You're letting nature be its thing.
We have to, yeah, just to sleep at night.
This is Duncan Myers, co-founder of Arno Roberts Winery, located in Healdsburg, which is in Sonoma County.
I would say the extreme weather events that we are calling the new normal are really requiring us to adapt and to be ready. 2022, it was a relatively short growing season punctuated by extreme heat event right at Labor Day that caused us to rush and pick much of our fruit in a short period of time before the heat spiked the sugars and potentially ruined the crop for us. 2023 came along and it was cool. We didn't see any heat through the entire year, and we had grapes hang on the vine until mid-November. Two extremely different vintages, 1 year apart. That's to me, the illustration of what we're dealing with.
We talk about terroir. We talk about those unique flavors that are created by their environment. Nature affects flavor. So when you're having these drastic weather changes, you are having drastic changes to the wine grapes. Every bit of flavor is affected by climate change.
There's a fine balance of water content or juice content in a grape and the thickness of the skin. And in a perfect year, those are both in balance. And in a really dry year, you've got potentially thicker skins and less juice inside of the grape, and that throws the balance off a bit.
How does that affect your yield? Because I think that's also another thing that, you know, when you're talking about, you know, less juice in the grape, right?
In 2015, we had extremely low yields because we had some sunburn, so we had to cull some fruit, so that decreased our yield. And then dehydration is just the weight of each individual berry weighs less. Each cluster weighs less as a result. So if you have an acre of grapes that you normally get 3 tons off of, in 2015 we got like 1.5. We got almost half of what we would normally get. It's a huge difference. We have to be prepared for on any given year having decreased yields, and then on the next year maybe making up for it by having a bit better yield, and, you know, hopefully on the curve of a business you average it out.
2020, our vineyard was burned on 2 sides. I mean, we it wasn't just smoke damage. It was literally, we had fire running down the rows between over century-old grapevines. That is a whole new reality now.
Once it then starts raining and that starts getting pulled into the soil, right? All that natural ash. Is that a benefit or is that a negative? And how does it affect the product, the grapes as a whole?
I can tell you that ash on grapes, and then you bring grapes into the winery and you go through harvest and vinification and fermentation, etc. That's directly and indirectly where you get smoke taint and where your wine is ruined. From a soil perspective, that's a more complex question.
I mean, I can understand from an all-natural ash, meaning like trees and shrubs and grasses, but then when you start thinking about homes, right, plastics, all of those things that are toxic, that do get, like, we all know that's going to affect something. We just don't know how long it's there and how long it leaches into the ground and how far it will travel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to deal with the grapes that on an annual basis, you can say, well, it's not an easy thing to do from a financial perspective, but it's an easy thing to say, well, these are fucked. Okay, unending amounts of money, we'll make some more next year, we can try again. You work on an annual basis, but well, what about these vines in this soil that are going to grow these grapes next year? Is there something in there too that's going to be a much slower acting situation? I think that that's a really good question, that we haven't been in this situation long enough to authoritatively say this is what it's going to do in all these different areas.
In California, wildfire is a huge concern. It can ruin the crop almost immediately. And it changes the environment in the area where it happens too, right? It can bake the soil, and it removes all the trees, so the shade, so it increases the heat the following year in the area because you have more radiation just hitting the ground, and the animals are gone and the ecosystem changes fundamentally. We are surrounded in many of our vineyards by forest, thousands and thousands of acres of conifer forest, and if those go up in smoke.
Especially with conifer, like when I do barbecue, I don't use all those creosote sticks. I actually just use pine cones because they are built in to catch fire naturally.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Right, exactly. Well, creosol and guaiacol are the two compounds in the conifers that are the highly volatile, explosive and volatile, right? And so they burn like crazy, and then they have traction. They stick really well.
Wildfire destruction can have lasting effects on the greater ecosystem. Things just don't bounce back to the way they were. This is Dr. Nathan Wolf, an ecophysiologist at Alaska Pacific University. Here he explains how the burnt areas have long-term effect on the ecosystem as a whole.
If I take a dark-colored pebble and I put it on a glacier, I'll see after not too long a little bowl of melt surrounding it because it's absorbing that heat and re-radiating. So in a regional and global sense, the more dark-colored things we have, parking lots, burn areas, we can increase the temperature of our atmosphere. And this is really what drives global warming. But on a local level, that radiation can cause increased snowmelt, increased glacial melt. If your snowpack melts quickly and you get this giant pulse of water, and then as that water comes in a huge bolus, as you said, it takes everything, sediments, atmospheric deposition to fire retardants with it. That runs into streams, causes detrimental effects to those organisms that live there and spawn there, and eventually runs out into the ocean as well.
This is Dylan Osleger, an earth scientist. Here he explains the broader effects of wildfires on soil, water, and erosion.
Fire is so good at eroding delicate soils off of mountain slopes. You go down to Santa Barbara, 2018, Thomas Fire. You have tons of wildfire, and then you get these huge kind of atmospheric storms that dump water, strip soil right off the landscape, dump it right into the ocean. Typically, we don't get these massive atmospheric river storms immediately after fires, which have started to happen later in the year. Like the Thomas Fire was 2018, but it started late December and it went through to February. That's rainy season. We don't typically see those two overlap. And, even just a few years ago, you look at something like the Mosquito Fire up in the Tahoe to Auburn area, and it closed off a ton of gravel and road cycling and rafting and fishing. But then you get down to like all of a sudden the wetlands area in Sacramento. It impacted the rice harvest over there, and like the Yolo bypass area. It moved through and started impacting all the farms that were drawing water just past Sacramento towards like Davis and Woodland and Rockland, they don't want water that's tainted with wildfire chemicals, because you have the U.S. Forest Service industrial firefighting complex coming in and dropping tons of chemicals onto those active wildfires, which then get washed downstream. So you have this issue where you can't use that water for irrigation super safely on farms, results in more tilling. And then if you ride through at that same time with windy season, you see the fresh soil going up in the air and mixing with the bad fire-scarred soil. All that winds up in the bay and the estuary, and then you get cloudy water that doesn't do well for fisheries.
Wildfires ravage communities. You have smoke, you have the natural oils and creosote that is in the air from said fires that adhere to things. We have fire retardant that gets into the water. And then you also have the communities that are working in these areas that are affected. Bottling, label making, shipping, restaurants. There's a whole world that's affected.
There's been a lot of conversation about grapes having to migrate. People are talking about that on the regular now, that they're not surviving or thriving in the area that has been their thriving zone.
You're seeing that in Napa a little bit, like Terroir Nacional is a variety we work with that's a Portuguese variety that's really well adapted to heat. And you're seeing some Cabernet Sauvignon producers in Napa plant Terroir Nacional because it's really resilient to heat. It makes a different style of wine than Cabernet Sauvignon, similar but different. And I think you'll see more of that, more of the embracing of varieties that are going to do better for the given location. And the market has to want to absorb that too, right? So there's some education to the consumer. You know, what happened to my Napa Cabernet? Well, now it's Terroir Nacional. That's going to take a while before that is embraced.
Winemakers have been planning for this.
When we decided to make the hard decision, but to sell, one of the entities that was looking into buying was a Napa Valley winery. And we're in the Russian River Valley, where there's historically predominantly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay grown, much, much cooler climate varietals. But they were looking at us because they were looking down the road at a future home for Cabernet.
I think it's interesting that this is all happening already in the background and not being openly discussed. Wineries are looking to buy up vineyards in areas that were historically too cold for Cabernet Sauvignon. Is that how they plan to survive with their signature wine? Where is that California or Napa Valley cab going to go? There's the conversation.
People ask this all the time, like, where is the next frontier with global warming in California? And there are places still in California that are marginally too cold to grow grapes. But real estate is not getting any cheaper in California, and trying to expand into locations in this state that don't have grapes is becoming more and more difficult, just cost prohibitive. You can take a look at the map and kind of pinpoint areas that are still quite cold, but they may not have the right soil type. So really that rarefies that perfect combination even further.
I'd like to give a shout out to Protect Our Winters, 11th Hour Racing, and Athletic Brewing for their support and belief in this project. Make sure you subscribe and like, share with your friends, and look for the next upcoming film. Buy local, buy smart. Thank you.